Okay, hello, and welcome to the second episode of this eSchool News webinar series. This is entitled How Sharing Unlocks the True Power of Your Teachers and Students' Video Creations. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the editor at large for eSchool, and I'm very excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's event is brought to you by Screencastify. Founded in 2014, Screencastify is the top video creation suite for K-12 educators and students. They have earned the trust of teachers in more than 70% of districts because the company was built by teachers for teachers. Nearly 50% of Screencastify's team are former educators or administrators, ensuring that each district customer receives support from a dedicated team member with hands-on experience in an educational environment. They strive to provide schools and districts the easy ability to create, share, and assess instructional and student videos. Before we go into our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. There will be a time at the end for our speakers to address these questions, and I highly encourage everybody online here today to drop in your ideas and your questions as we go along. It really does help add insights to the conversations. There's also a chat function that you can launch by clicking on that. Feel free to use this feature to contact someone from the eSchool News team if you're having a technical question or concern. There's also a closed caption tab by clicking on that. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with this conversation. I'm really excited to get into it. As I mentioned earlier, this is part two. Before we started talking about just the general concepts of video creation, and really the conversation fell into how much it has accelerated in just these past 2 years because of the pandemic and both the students being at home and having these new tools, as well as teachers being thrust into this greatest beta test of all time. And whether you wanted to use remote tools or remote learning tools, other parts of edtech tools, you had to use them whether you liked it or not, right? So here we are with that. Going into this next level of conversation, I think it's going to be even more interesting in that while before the pandemic, especially students were using these tools to some degree, but the idea of sharing them and them actually become part of the learning process, I think is something that is definitely still, there's some uncharted territory here that I know our panelists will certainly be able to help us with. And so with that, I'd like each of our panelists to maybe just give us a few minutes to give us an introduction into their work and why they're here on the conversation. And maybe Sam, I'll put you on the hot seat first.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kevin, and everybody. Welcome. And yeah, so my name is Sam Carey. I am the founder of New EdTech Classroom. We make primarily video-based content to support teachers with how to build authentic, engaging, and student-driven learning experiences. And we are former classroom educators. I actually was a tech skeptic for quite a long period of time in my own career. So really coming to the world of education technology through the lens of research-based instructional practices. And once I saw how I could transform my own classroom with the combination of those instructional practices and technology, I decided I wanted to share that with others. So that's the origin of our YouTube channel. And we are dedicated to making videos. So obviously feel like video is a really important means to spread our message around and help teachers all around the world.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Sam. And Jesse, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Jesse Fidelio Garza. I'm super excited to be here. I am a technology integration coordinator for Los Fresnos CISD, and that's in Los Fresnos, Texas. We're deep down South Texas. We're about 30 minutes away from Mexico and about 30 minutes away from South Padre Island, Texas. So yes, Texas does have a little island called South Padre Island. And when it gets 70 degrees, people normally get their scarves and their Uggs out. It's a really fun little community. And when we encountered the pandemic, like everybody else did, we had to kind of start creating these really wonderful and instructional videos for our teachers, our students, and more importantly, the community. And Screencastify was a big part of that. And so it really solved a lot of the hiccups that we encountered.
Great. Well, thanks, Jesse. And last but certainly not least, Henry.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. Thanks everybody for joining. And Sam and Jesse, great to be on here with you as well. So yeah, obviously my name is Henry. I am Screencastify's Director of Product. What that basically means is my job is to make sure that the tools that we are building are doing the best job they can to make the lives of teachers and students easier. Specifically, what I really care about is figuring out how video can be an effective and efficient part of the modern K-12 classroom. That's what we think about all day. My background is more in education than it is in technology. I've never been a classroom teacher, but I've been in and around K-12 most of my career in a variety of capacities. So, honestly, serving teachers and students is why I'm here. And really excited to talk about this today. So thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and I'm really ready to dive into this with our first question. Why is it important for content to not just be created, but to be made accessible for students, parents, and even colleagues? As I mentioned, BP before the pandemic, I have three little beta testers here, three students who, I guess my oldest started with Vine maybe as a video creation tool, way back when, right? In 2015, 2016, but have watched each of them as well as ourselves use video in one way or another to create content, but not necessarily to communicate or share. Sam, talk about where you see that, where video sharing has become as important as the creation aspect of it.
Yeah, in my mind, actually, creation and sharing of video content has sort of always been integral to the format. If you think about essentially what video does, it allows us as humans to effectively clone ourselves, right, and transport ourselves to any location possible. If you think about what a TV does to, say, people acting, right, instead of going and just watching people on a stage, you can capture that through video and you can transmit that to people's television sets, right? And really part and parcel to the actual creation of the content is the need to be able to share that out into the world. So I think to really actually achieve the basic fundamental purpose of video, which again is to clone ourselves and multiply our voices, it has to be shared. So, sure, you could make video content and just play it for yourself, I guess, but that's kind of not really doing the job of video. So to me, content creation, in order to be effective, if you're going to do it via video, it pretty much mandates sharing it.
Right. But when I think about, I guess YouTube is another platform, right, where you're talking about video creation, and I think about it in terms of, there was a kind of the consumer experience or the general society experience of people creating videos. But Doctor, talk a little bit about making that within the day-to-day operations of a school or within a district. I mean, there's a big difference between a student, say, just making a video and putting it up on YouTube versus the process of going through a course of curriculum. Can you shed a little light on that?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Kevin. Accessibility allows for really distinct pathways. And for a school district, videos are being developed and created for multiple purposes, whether they're being created from a marketing, social media perspective with that lens in mind, or whether they're being used for instructional purposes. But that even being said, the videos that I create as a technology integration coordinator, those how-to videos, the end goal is to make sure that the teachers totally understand what it is I'm talking about. They then in turn will create their own videos to help with students. And the student videos that students create themselves will be used for a different population, a different viewer, a different audience, so to speak. And so really Screencastify answers multiple solutions, multiple problems that we offer as the solutions, but it really answers a lot of problems that we didn't know existed, and so it's making sure that accessibility is available so that students can, create what they need to create for the assignment. They can create that end product, and they can focus more on the actual product itself as opposed to, okay, well, how am I going to create a video? We can simplify that. Let's focus on the content, let's focus on what your end product is going to be, and so I think that it really has leveled the playing ground for everybody to produce videos for multiple access points, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I mean, it's really expanded the user base then to where maybe at first glance you would think, well, this is a tool for students to use and for teachers to assess. Henry, talk a little bit about how you've seen your tools accelerate, as many edtech tools have during the pandemic, but where maybe was there an expectation of teachers or even families using your product the way they are now when it first got started back in 2014?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Screencastify has sort of accidentally become an edtech tool. So originally we were founded just as this kind of simple video creation widget in Chrome, right? And I think over the years, as we saw that the user base was heavily tilted towards teachers, right? We're talking, 2015 to like 2018 sort of. That's when we really made an intentional shift of like wanting to build this product out further to really serve the needs of teachers and students. And that's when, frankly, that's, as the company grew, that's when we really started to hire a lot of former educators. And that's really become the priority. Not even, not just the priority. I mean, that's really all we think about all day. I think it's, to talk about COVID is so hard, right? Because on one hand, this has been a devastating event for literally everybody. On the other hand, it's been a really fascinating moment for education to watch how schools, teachers, students of all types have adapted to this moment. Honestly, like probably the thing that I've been most proud of in my entire career is being able to be there to help teachers in this crazy moment of need. We certainly saw a lot of changes in how folks are using the product in the last 18 months. In particular, we saw a lot of teachers who had never thought about creating video coming into the product and wanting to figure out how to make video an effective part of their teaching. And I think one of the big lessons we learned when we talk about sharing content is that we had focused so much on creation of content that we had sort of neglected this idea of sharing the content. And to second what Sam said, sharing is the essential part of making a video. You have to get it in front of an audience for it to be effective. And if you're a teacher, you want to know if your students are watching it, because you want to know, A, is this a useful piece of content for them? Are they learning what I hope they're learning from it? But also, is it worth it for me to spend more time making more videos? And so that has been a significant driver of what we've worked on over the last year, and was really the force behind the release we had in September of viewer analytics, of our watch page, and of interactive questions.
That's really interesting. That kind of it sounds like you're building up on the guts when you mention analytics to really make it an assessment tool as much as a platform for sharing. But we've touched on the aspect of how families have been more engaged now in these past 2 years in a strange way when it comes to reaching out, because you couldn't be there in person, right? So as we sit here on Zoom, we're all comfortable with that now, but there's a lot of synchronous aspects of that too. Jesse, maybe you could talk a little bit about how technology has evolved parents' visibility into students' learning and the role that they can play in aiding that process.
Absolutely. I mean, during the pandemic, you had parents, you had guardians that really got a front row seat of what their child was learning. And I mean, not to say that parents never really were involved. I'm sure they were. And I like to think positive and say that every parent guardian is involved in their child's education. I really want to believe that in my heart of hearts, right? But really what happened during the pandemic is that every parent and guardian got to see, got to hear, and really got a spoonful of what their child is getting every single day in instruction from pre-K through grade 12, right? And with that being said, they saw, what teachers were going through. They saw some of those struggles and they got to see firsthand, okay, this is a newfound, frontier that we're going to be embarking on, and we're going to have to cross this bridge together. It was frustrating for many parents and guardians, I'm pretty sure. But with that being said, with the videos and with Screencastify and teachers being able to create videos and other lectures, other presentations, and to be able to offer those for moments when the child couldn't be on a live stream on Google Meet, couldn't be on a Zoom call, couldn't be there for synchronous instruction, and have that availability to them for asynchronous instruction, for at-home learning. That really was, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It really was, like that silver lining after a storm. And it really helped a lot of students understand, okay, you know what, I may not be able to be in there because I might not have internet, connectivity throughout the day, but after hours, I probably will have internet connectivity, because of the broadband and where I live and all of that. And I will be able to watch those videos, and to give that guarantee for teachers to have that, reassurance, that really helped out a lot.
Yeah, it seems that the synchronous aspects of video during the pandemic really took center stage. But as you talk about that, Doctor, the asynchronous benefits. I mean, again, we just told the audience at the beginning of this webinar, like, don't worry if you miss something, we're going to be sending it to you later. Henry, can you talk a little bit about where you see that synchronous versus asynchronous when it comes to video creation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, whoever would have guessed it, we would have been intimately familiar with what those words meant. That certainly has been a learning journey for all of us. But yeah, I think, asynchronous, or just the watching a video when it's not happening live, right? I think is incredibly important. To me, live video is basically a worse substitute for having your teacher actually in front of you in a classroom where you can, really interact with them. So it's sort of just like a stopgap measure to try and create a classroom experience online. That is different than asynchronous video, right? Asynchronous video, I think, has a lot of benefits for students and lowers a lot of barriers that students have faced in learning in traditional environments. For example, if I am bored with part of a lecture, right? If it's going too slowly, I can press the speed up button. I can increase the speed. More importantly, if I need to slow it down or I need to rewatch something, I can do that. You can't rewind your teacher in a live class. You can't rewind your teacher on a live, online class either. That's what asynchronous video really provides for. So I personally am just deeply excited about the possibilities of lowering barriers for students who aren't able to learn in a traditional context, but really can use video as a way to lower those barriers. The last thing I just want to say, quickly to speak to the family question. I have a kindergartner this year. This is my first time actually, experiencing school as a parent, and it's been so fascinating to watch the role of video. I haven't been able to spend any time in her classroom because of COVID, but thanks to videos produced by our teacher, I now see what the class is like. I see what day-to-day routines are like. I get a picture of what's going on that I probably wouldn't have even gotten if I could have visited the classroom occasionally, right? And so it's really been quite interesting to see the power of asynchronous video as a parent as well.
Yeah, I've had more interactions with my kids' teachers in the past 18 months and I've had them in schools for 18 years. So it has been certainly improvement, whether we like it or not. Sam, does what Henry talk about resonate with you at all?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot more to add. Henry and Dr. Jesse said it so well. Really, I think making the point ultimately that there's actually quite a bit that's broken about the traditional model of direct instruction that asynchronous instruction fixes. And that's not a pandemic model of instruction. It's just actually a more effective model of instruction, and research backs this. So I think there's a pretty strong argument to be made that anytime you are essentially presenting students with material that they need to learn, essentially direct instruction, that should be done via asynchronous video. Again, for the accessibility reasons that both Dr. Jesse and Henry mentioned, and also the ability for parents to be able to access that material too, like Henry mentioned. So that's something that's not talked about as frequently. But if you are posting all of your materials to your learning management system, that you just suddenly opened a window to your classroom that simply didn't exist before. And Dr. Jesse was talking about how it's been hard. It's hard for parents to know. That's partially baked into the traditional system. How could you possibly know? You're really reliant upon a student reporting to you what's being taught or talking to a parent a couple times a year during a conference. But if you have access to the same instructional videos, then you can actually see what students are supposed to be learning, and parents can help at a whole other level. And I know that a lot of parents want to help. The barrier is often we don't actually know what's going on. And another thing that I would add there rightfully is, a continued interest and renewed interest really in figuring out how do we make this profession more manageable, more sustainable. And I think video can also play a role in that, whether through personalized instruction for teachers, which is something that we, pride ourselves in trying to provide that kind of personalized instruction just through YouTube videos. You want to go learn something, you can learn it. But also that you can essentially start to create an archive of content for yourself that you can use year after year. And ideally, I think start sharing that with other teachers too, so that other teachers can use it. So I think it's beneficial for everyone involved.
Yeah, it just continues to seem that innovations keep popping up through the use of the technologies, right? Just as you mentioned, it's like, oh, wow, now we can do this and build it into our learning management system, which probably might not have been on people's minds as recently as 2 or 3 years ago. So Henry, I want to gear this next question towards you first. Screencastify's Submit tool has an incredible way for teachers to share video assignments that students can create and then easily send back. Talk about the goals that Screencastify had for that tool and how it can open doors for students to create.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, I think, a really exciting development in our product. It's been around since August of 2020, so it's relatively new. And really the genesis for this part of the product was really looking at learning science research and really understanding that if schools develop to really embrace what we're learning in research, student video is going to become such a critical part of the classroom in the future. Simply because the goal of assessment is not to, unless it's an English language arts assessment, to understand if students can write. The goal is to understand what they're thinking, what they understand, what they have learned, right? And when we put certain mechanisms of assessment in front of students, right, write a paper, present a slideshow, whatever it is, we are potentially putting barriers for that student expressing what they have learned just by the means of the assignment themselves. If I am not a confident writer, I'm going to struggle writing a paper, even if I know what I'm writing about, right? And so we really believe in the power of student video as a really easy, low barrier way to communicate what you're thinking. And because of the screen sharing component, you can actually walk through the actual artifact of your work, right? So if you do have to write a paper, you can make a video that narrates what you were thinking at different sections of the paper to kind of overcome any obstacles you felt in the actual writing itself. So for all of these reasons, we just really believe in the power of video as a student tool. So the next question was, are teachers currently using Screencastify as a student-facing tool? And the answer was some, right? Particularly innovative teachers were doing this, but there are a number of reasons that it wasn't happening at a larger scale. One, for lower grade students, it's still a lot of work to set up an extension, to create an account, to figure out what type of recording, all of that. Those are a lot of clicks, even if it feels easy to us as adults. The second was, if I'm a teacher and I just got 30 students to record a quick video, I now need to make sure I get the links to every single one of those videos, which in itself can be a Herculean task, and make sure the sharing permissions were correct on the drive file. All of that was a problem. So Submit was designed to answer both of those problems by allowing teachers to create a video assignment that they would pre-populate with the type of recording, eliminate as many choices as possible for students that would get in the way of them expressing themselves, then be able to just share that link with students. Students don't need the extension installed. So again, lower a barrier there. They just click a button, record, communicate to the camera or on their screen what they've learned, and then hit stop recording. And then the video would immediately upload and be sent to the teacher. And so it really just was designed to streamline that whole process that often took multiple steps into one simple workflow for teachers and students. And we've been really rewarded just seeing the feedback from our community, from teachers and students about how it's working for them, particularly over the last 18 months.
Yeah, Sam, talk a little bit about the teacher aspect of that. Henry was talking about making things easier for the student. I'm going to suspect that some professional development has to go on the teacher side of tool. Like how beneficial is it for the teachers to have easy use tools when it comes to sharing back and forth with the students?
Yeah, I mean, actually, a huge barrier that we've faced, because we've long advocated for teachers to be using screencasting as a student creation tool. But a major barrier that teachers face is that it's not just logistically challenging to install an extension. Some are just blocked from doing so, so there's not even the option to allow students to be able to add an extension, or you have to go through a pretty significant rigmarole to get it approved at the district level or at your admin level, and they have to push that extension out to browsers. So it's not like something you can just turn right around and use. So to eliminate that as a barrier is just a clear way to open the door for greater access. And I agree with Henry. It's an incredibly powerful tool to use. We've advocated for its use for a while because of its power to, I think, really bump up the rigor on Bloom's taxonomy. So you can take any assignment and once you add an explanatory element to it, that in and of itself adds a layer of metacognition, right? So let's take, for example, a student is writing a paper, and maybe they did actually do the research and write the paper. They can actually go back, make an explanatory video explaining their whole process, step by step, what they did, maybe how it showed certain learning targets, and how it, showed growth in some areas and what they would do to improve. Talking again about the previous question about visibility, that can be shared with families, so families can see the work that their students are doing in a whole different way. And it's something students can then gather and put all together in a digital portfolio that they can also explain, their whole work over a long period of time. So there's just so many use cases, whether it's, think about all the challenges people face with tech issues. For example, screencasting is the most effective way to show, hey, this is what's happening on my computer. I'm having a problem with this thing, and, be able to quickly share that back. There are all kinds of activities you can do, like scavenge hunts and things, where you're actually having students practice in a real way some foundational technology skills. I think screencasting is the best way to do that. So it's not only practical, but I think really increases the rigor in a classroom. And Screencastify has reduced the barrier to teachers being able to do those types of things by kind of skirting the issue of students needing to have the extension.
How does that sound, Dr. Garza? The idea of breaking down these barriers for the use of the tools, especially by teachers?
Absolutely, 100%. Many times, and this is really like a testament to some of the technology administrators that are hopefully listening and watching, it is beyond beneficial. It is something that we really need to be open to hearing. Oftentimes, and I'll be the first to admit, when I hear a teacher say, oh, there's this really great, Chrome extension or Chrome add-on or Google add-on, my red flags start to pop up. That's just the normal thing, because you start thinking about cybersecurity, you start thinking about all of these things that could potentially go wrong. And that is like being super transparent right now, right? With cybersecurity in school districts and cyber attacks and ransomware, your mind starts to go like in circles thinking about all these different things that could happen to your teacher laptops, your student laptops, all of those things, right? However, that being said, it's so important for us as technology leaders at the district level to be open-minded to seeing, okay, well, you know what, this teacher took the time out of his or her day to review multiple products and said, you know what, this is the product line that we really need to go through. And guess what? It's legit. Many districts are using it. It's COPA compliant, it's CIPA compliant. It is a really great program that, we could really use. It solves not only one problem, it solves multiple problems, and it makes it beneficial to keep it open. I think that part of this question was, to follow up on making it easy for teachers to share assignments, but it's beyond the sharing of the assignments. It's beyond that. To me, it's more of like, we really have to listen to what our teachers are saying, what they're asking for, and that's where this program came about. that's how it came to my desk, because I thought, well, you know what, Screencastify, that sounds pretty great. Let's look into this, because I kind of like to keep an open mind. But when I found out that it was available for students too, and how students can be able to submit assignments, it's growing. And right now we're at the cusp where every student that's out there right now knows a YouTuber, knows a content creator. That is the theme that we're seeing, where, as Sam mentioned, the high level of Bloom's digital taxonomy, where it's the creation aspect of it, it's right here with this platform. And I think that we need to really allow for that to take place.
Yeah, you mentioned platform, and I go back and forth always between, is it a tool, is it a platform, what is it? But so Submit is part of the Screencastify suite that basically simplifies that workflow that you're talking about, Doctor, right? In terms of the sharing of assignments. What are the benefits do you find of being able to create and share using a single platform versus multiple? And how can that help teachers that are certainly under tech fatigue or complex tech stacks already as it is? And Sam, I'll go to you first on that one.
Yeah, so I think it merits highlighting another feature, and that's the new interactive question feature that Screencastify offers, which is another way that Screencastify has eliminated the need to app smash or stack programs. Again, something we've been advocating for a long time is taking your instructional videos and adding interactive questions to them. Well, prior to the Screencastify update, you had to bring that video into another program. And whenever you're asking teachers to do that, you're going to lose a significant portion of them. Understandably, it's kind of a pain to have to do that. But we also really believe that if you are going to implement a blended learning classroom, and this applies to any physical circumstance where your classroom is taking place, that it's actually it's a pretty big problem if you don't know what students are actually doing, right? What they're understanding or not. And students don't really have a way for themselves to check their own understanding if you don't have these built-in checks for understanding. So once you take asynchronous instruction, there's, we've already talked about why that's a powerful tool. And then you embed check for understanding questions. Then you get formative assessment built in that the teacher can see to just know, like, all right, they're good. They're on it. I can continue with my in-classroom flip, where you might have students watching videos and you're able to pull groups and pull individual students and free up all your time and space the way you've always dreamed of doing. But then students can also see in the moment whether they're getting the key idea or not. So it's important, as a teacher, when you're making the questions, that they're really focused on what is the key idea that you want people to take away while watching the video. But it's just another way that it adds potency to that asynchronous instruction. And I think it's something not a lot of people were doing beforehand because it required multiple programs to do it. And so I'm very happy that Screencastify has added that feature. And I think speaks to what Henry was talking about, that they're really like focused on optimizing it for education, because that's such clearly a tool that is beneficial for teaching and learning.
Yeah, Doctor. So you talked about breaking down the barriers for teachers, but we're also talking about increasing efficiencies at the same time, right? I mean, do you see that having that single platform is making the use of these technologies less onerous for faculty?
Absolutely. Tech fatigue is a big thing that a lot of us need to really be aware of as well. Socially, emotionally, we're focused on the well-being of many of our children right now, but we also need to look at the people that are leading them, which are our teachers that are in the classroom right now too. They also have a family. They also have a significant other that they have to take care of too. They also plan during the day and after hours as well. And so creating one platform like what we have right now with Screencastify that optimizes everything as the Google Admin Console administrator for the district, that to me is like music to my ears. Knowing that a teacher can create a video, drop in a couple questions, that are interactive, and guess what? It saves automatically in the Google Drive for that teacher. To me, it kills more than two birds with one stone. It really just solidifies a lot of the reasoning why we chose this platform. Again, it also solidifies why we're listening to our teachers. And when we polled our students, Kevin, and said, what platforms do you want to have come next year, which is this academic year, because last academic year, we went a little bit cray-cray, getting a bunch of different platforms, and I'll be honest and transparent. We got Pear Deck, we got Nearpod, we got Screencastify, we got a bunch of other programs too, Edpuzzle. And this academic year, we polled the students again and said, what programs do you want to have? Screencastify is one of those programs that for students, they find it to be almost like edutainment. They think it's entertaining to see their teacher, speak, teach them, and they can see it on demand whenever they want, right? And for teachers, it's great that they get to share their best favorite, topic or lesson. And guess what? It's going to be there for next year. So I can just push play, I can send it, I can tweak it if I want to tweak it, and so it really builds upon best practices over best practices over best practices. And teachers can look back and say, wow, look at that. Look at how I did, and so I think that that's a really big thing. It eliminates a tech fatigue. It really does eliminate that. And it allows the teacher to focus more on what they're teaching and how they can teach it. They can dream big.
Let me get you deeper into the weeds with your answer there, which was terrific. But what are some of the must-have features within that platform that you were just talking about that you see as the number one? So you already kind of said, this is a must-have amongst a lot of different tools and platforms. But what are the features within Screencastify that you find to be the most important?
Obviously, the Google Drive feature was a winner. The QR code creator generator right after you create a video was a huge winner. Many of us didn't know what a QR code was for a while. Because of the pandemic, many people started going to restaurants, going to the elevator door, and seeing a QR code and realizing what that was. When you have 85-year-old people down the street hovering their camera phone over a QR code, something has been accomplished, right? And when you have children that are 5 years old hovering their iPad over a QR code, clearly there's now a connection, a bridge has been built, right? But so that's definitely a big winner, right? But I will say what our teachers look for in any platform, but what they loved about Screencastify is the LMS tie-in, and LMS is an acronym for Learning Management System, and the one that we use in our district here at Los Fresnos CISD is Google Classroom. No surprise there, we are a Google district, right? So that is the platform that we use. It's a platform that students love, that teachers love, and that parents feel that they can totally manage to at home. And so that has really allowed, I think, a lot of like the positivity. It's really allowed for a lot of the good things to happen. So it's really integration of LMS. It's the in-depth analytics. Teachers want to know, are the kids watching these videos? Are they answering these questions? It's great when you do a bunch of videos, but if you have no analytics on the back end, then you're kind of like, why am I creating videos if nobody's watching them? So having those analytics for our teachers and making sure that they are being watched, that has been really great. And it just, I think we're looking for stuff that is just effective and efficient. Those two things, just really quite simply effective and efficient. And Screencastify is just that for our population of teachers.
Yeah, again, we're kind of going back to the analytics there and to the guts that Henry talked about. That's development, which is kind of interesting. I mean, maybe it's maybe a little bit more boring than when you talk about kind of the cool stuff when you're talking about video creation, but as an education tool, it certainly seems like it's a must-have. Sam, how about for you in terms of must-have features? What tops the list?
Sorry about that, guys. Unmuting my mic. Yes, same comment that Dr. Jesse made just about the ability to add questions. I mean, to me, if you're going any program where you have a means of sharing content with students has to have some way of getting feedback on the back end of that. So you're taking a static piece of content and making it interactive. So that's both through the interactive check for understanding questions that are embedded in a video, but then also the ability to see the analytics, exactly like Dr. Jesse was saying. And also with the assignment feature, just essentially the ability to take one assignment and multiply that out, right? So, with whether it's a piece of code or whatever is, getting put on that allows it to be turned into an individual assignment for students. That's what teachers find valuable about Google Classroom. That's essentially what Google Classroom is. It puts code on, Google Docs or Google Slides and lets you take it and take what you did and then turn it into something that becomes an assignment that can then be submitted back to you. So you have this organization system. And so these days, like anything that I would recommend to teachers that they're going to use as a mechanism to share needs to have that built-in check for understanding with the organization system built directly into it. So there's no need to share something back with the teacher and hunt around and try to find it. So as integrated as possible, organized and interactive.
Yeah. Now, Henry, maybe you could put your analytics to the test. Talk a little bit about what you find your customers seeing as the most must-have features within the Screencastify platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to second everything that Dr. Garza and Sam have both said, it's really about how much does this tool integrate with the workflow I already have, and that includes tools, right, LMSs and so on. But to me, it's really a thing about time. Something we always talk about as a team, and something you're not aware of unless you spent time in the classroom, is that teachers are performing for the vast number of hours they are paid for, right? So that means that where I might have the luxury of, blocking out an hour on my calendar to learn a new tool, that is not something that teachers do unless they're doing it after hours or on a weekend, right? And we need to remember that, because anytime that we are asking teachers to go and learn something new, try a new tool, we're in effect asking them to spend some of their very, very precious time not working on directly impacting the outcomes of their students, but instead investing in something that might turn out to have some benefit down the road. And so I am always very aware of that ask, right? And that means that whenever we're doing something that changes workflow, adds a step, we give that incredibly harsh scrutiny because it needs to be worth it. And so for us, we often think quite literally about the number of clicks it takes to complete a workflow for a teacher. And that's honestly another reason that we built out questions and analytics, is because we saw that to go from creating a video to polishing a video to adding checks for understanding, sharing it with your students, and then assessing how effective that piece of content was, took a lot of platforms and a lot of clicks for teachers. And so anytime we have a chance to reduce that and make teachers' lives easier, allow them to spend more time focused on directly working with their students and being an effective classroom teacher, that is great. That's what we're here for. So to me, that's really the most important thing, is, again, that efficiency and the impact to what Dr. Garza said.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, something else that Dr. Garza touched on a little bit earlier was the idea of privacy and security. And that will go to our next question, Henry, about obviously with more content being shared, there are more eyes on privacy and security. What can be done to protect students and teachers' privacy and keep their content secure? Henry, maybe you can start off talking a little bit about some of the aspects of your tools that look towards that. Yeah,
absolutely. So, as Dr. Garza said, these, warning lights going off as you hear about more and more tools. I mean, if I was in an administration role, I would be terrified not knowing what random tools my teachers are using, and potentially are some of those tools actually collecting student data and selling them to marketers. Right? You don't necessarily know that unless you do a lot of research. So we have pride ourselves on keeping student privacy and teacher privacy at the core of what we do. And we make sure we get all of the privacy certifications we can get. That's really, really important to us. But it goes beyond that too, right? It's also just, even if you're compliant, what does that actually mean, and how does that feel to a teacher and student? So our integration with Google has been a big part of how we manage this. An example is sharing a watch page through Screencastify. So if you're a teacher, you just recorded an instructional video and you want to share it with your students. You often have different choices about how you allow people to access a piece of content, right? Is it just anyone who has the link can access it? Are you posting it online where other strangers could find it? Is it locked down to particular users? Right. And the sweet spot for a teacher is to know that nobody outside of your safe organization, which is your district, can access that piece of content, right? But at the same time, like, none of your students will be locked out from viewing if they try to. And so that's really what we focus on. So we're able to sort of use the domains and the information we get from Google to say, just allow this piece of content to be visible within my district. And that has been a really popular sort of privacy mechanism for teachers to share videos. Obviously, they can customize that too. If they want it to be shareable outside of their district, they can do that. But giving them really quick ways to sort of control access and make sure that unintended eyes will be on something, make sure that doesn't happen. That's been a really important part of how we think about sharing.
Yeah, Sam, how important is that to you in the day-to-day work you're doing with your educators? Is it something that's top of mind, or is it something that you already feel a confidence about that it's being protected? Talk a little bit about how you work that into your overall strategies.
Yeah, no, it's definitely top of mind, and it's a major factor in whether or not teachers can use tools at different schools. So you can't just, obviously there's different levels of flexibility, but you can't just, use any program you want, right? Like typically the teachers need to be able to get some level of approval about a program and whether or not, it's GDPR compliant and COPPA compliant and all that. So, the more that a program makes that information available and does actually secure data, it's just clearly going to be able to pass muster to be able to be used across multiple schools and districts. So it's definitely a factor, and it's a pretty major concern. It's something that I hear from a lot of teachers when I'm talking about new tools and suggesting new things. And I have to admit, I'm a little bit of the kind of break things and then and then see what happens afterwards. Kind of I'm excited about all this new stuff, and and people have to, they're asking me is that safe? And so it's incredibly valuable for a person like myself that's doing professional development when I can just very easily reference a page and say, yes, in fact, it is. Actually, it's what I love about the new Chromebook App Hub website, where Screencastify is on there and a bunch of other Chromebook compatible apps, and you can just scroll down to the bottom and you can pull the privacy information right there. So really, yeah, it's really important, and it's clearly, it should be important to educators.
That's great. Yeah. Now, again, Dr. Garza, we'll go back to some of your previous comments, but in terms of sharing content, we've seen a sort of fading technology that's been revitalized. You mentioned that the QR code coming back into vogue because of the pandemic. What are some of the ways that you see content sharing playing more of a role in the future? Doctor, maybe I'll go back to you on this one, that you see a technology like the QR code. Are you seeing more innovations pop up there?
Absolutely. One of the things that we encountered during the pandemic was one of our favorite places in every school, the library media center, that being a place that really allows for students to go in there, grab a book, kind of peruse and kind of look around and see what books, what cool things that students can check out. Well, that place was closed down, unfortunately, for many of our schools. However, our library media specialists were able to create these really great book trailers. They were able to do some really great book read alouds. And so being able to share those to the students that were sheltered in place at the time, and then when they came back to campus, they still had those books, right? And so those videos and all that stuff. So there was a deeper connection there. So I think that the sharing will really start to open up. I think more people, depending, not only teachers, but I think the different roles, from principals sharing newsletters and saying, you know what, why not make an announcement type of newsletter? Why not change the game of how I send my weekly announcements to my teachers and make it a video? Why not do things in different ways? And so I think that that's what's going to happen. The game is definitely already changed, but I think it's going to definitely evolve in the future as far as how sharing is done, depending on the role that that person is in education. People have all seen how teachers have used it in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And now we have library media specialists saying, okay, you know what? I can do a book trailer. I can do some more read alouds. I can, post it to my Google Classroom for my students to be able to see. You have a family engagement, for example, saying, oh, I can create a video and I can make it open to where everybody can see it in the community. Because the content for this video is really, how to train parents on how to be a parent in a digital world. But more than that, it's in Spanish too, como ser padre en un mundo digital. So it's doing that. So I'm really hitting two different demographics now. So it really is, Kevin, opening it up. It really is opening up the possibilities of how sharing can be done, depending on the role that person is in education.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Sam, how about for you, new innovations that you see coming down the pike through the use of these tools and platforms?
Yeah, I think video has and will continue to play a central role in teacher professional development, and in, I think, making teaching a more sustainable profession as well. So, one thing we've been able to accomplish through New EdTech Classroom, through our YouTube channel and our video-based resources, is to take our voice and clone it and multiply it and reach teachers all around the world and help teachers that would not have gotten the instruction and how to, teach using particular instructional strategies or how to use certain programs. They've been able to learn from us, here in California and Texas, and learn how to use these tools and learn how to implement these strategies because of the power of video. And something that, I think is not discussed as much about that is that it's also not just video per se. So it's not that I'm, recording myself doing, say, a webinar or like a long PD, sort of traditional way that people learn, or even the traditional way people have learned, online. It's actually making use of the other tools that are available to us with video, the ability to edit something down. So what we're able to do is something that you cannot do in a live setting. And that's essentially take what might be an hour's worth of content and pack that down into a very consolidated, 10, 12 minute long experience that becomes this kind of like, shot of knowledge right in your brain, right? That you can really like learn how to use something or do something different in 10 to 12 minutes rather than having to spend 3 hours or 1 hour learning something. So we see video, not just the creation of video, but also the manipulation of video and editing of video as really playing a critical role in bringing educators up to speed who are in the field now, in terms of how to teach with technology and also in the future of teacher education. And I also think in terms of what teachers are creating themselves, we can really use that to our advantage to start sharing that more widely. I'd love to see an archive essentially of that content being housed in a single location so teachers can go pull those videos and not always feel like they have to recreate the wheel of what it means to be a teacher and create curriculum, because so many people have already created it. And I think that's a way that we can definitely ease the burden of what it means to be a teacher today.
It's so exciting to think about these concepts becoming reality, right? I mean, there's so many years where the idea of the flipped classroom was just kind of this conceptual thing. And well, you know what? Now you guys are doing it. And as we get to close to the top of the hour here, Henry, maybe I'll leave it to you to give us a little sneak peek into the roadmap and where you see some of these future innovations coming when it comes to Screencastify's services and products.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time for us. One of the things we think a lot about is the different use cases that video has in the classroom. And it's not just instructional video. It's not just student video, right? We've talked about communicating with parents, how impactful that can be. We've talked about how-to videos on how to use different pieces of software. One thing we haven't touched on that I'm particularly excited about is the power of video-based feedback. I think I will never forget a conversation I had with a ELA teacher in Mississippi a year or so ago. And she had spent so much of her career writing out handwritten notes on student papers and trying to get students to iterate on their work, and then eventually, text comments in Google Docs. And then she had iterated to actually use Screencastify to record feedback videos on those papers. And she had found that how much her students actually paid attention to her notes and were willing to do significant revisions on their papers just escalated dramatically when they actually got to see her talking through their papers, see her face, hear the tone of voice, like actually watch her reading through a paper, right? That made it real, and students really then were excited to make their work better. And so I'm really excited about the power of video-based feedback and how that can drive improvements in outcomes. So that's something that we're looking at closely and running some experiments on. Certainly, more to come on that in the future, but that is a frontier we're looking at in addition to many others.
That's great. And we still have a little bit of time for one more question, which I think would be great to finish up with both Sam and Jesse. A question that came in here. What advice would you have to encourage more sharing for inexperienced creators, whether that be students or teachers? I know you guys are pretty far along this path, obviously, but for folks here in the audience who maybe are just kind of getting started in this, what would be some tips and tricks that you would provide for them to get started? Jesse, we'll start with you.
I normally show the teachers my first Screencastify video, and it's like a legit hot mess, okay? And it's so funny, but I use that. I'm like, look at me, I was like a hot mess, And then like it kind of came together, it all kind of like strung along together. And for our students, I think at this point, honestly, they've seen teachers, accidentally, mic themselves off, or, so little hiccups like that. I really do think that students are very, very empathetic right now. Teachers are too. And I think that anybody that's an experienced creator for Screencastify know that there's so many resources that are available to you. The videos are really short, like the how-to videos that you all have on your website are really, really great and impactful. And I think that there's a lot of support on the website on the back end, as opposed to us being on the front end too. But I mean, I definitely show my first video, and it's kind of embarrassing, but I show it to them, and then they see like, wow, okay, So that's pretty cool to show.
That's a good tip. Now, Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important first step is just do it. Just make one. Everybody's got to start somewhere. And actually, if it's not so good, if you're the teacher, then you've just modeled for students that theirs can also be not so good. If you're making something that's highly polished, then they might feel actually more intimidated by that. I do think there are some things you can do to help make them better and not feel like you have to hit stop and re-record it. One is particularly when you're getting started, to make a bullet pointed list of just key points you want to make. If you're going to make a screencast where you're explaining how to use a program, or say maybe explaining how your learning management system is organized or something, walk through it one time before you do it. It might seem like a waste of time, but once you're on your like fifth recording of trying to do it because you just realize like, I forgot to say this thing or whatever, then it won't be a waste of time. So particularly when you're getting started, just kind of like a dry rehearsal without recording it. Same thing I would do when making a YouTube video. When I sit down in front of the camera, it's not the first time I've said those words and kind of done everything that I'm doing in front of the camera. But just like the first video I ever recorded on a camera became my first YouTube video, I'd also just say, just go for it and, start making videos.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I see that our time is just about up, so I'm going to wrap things up here. If you submitted a question that we didn't get to in the Q&A, someone from Screencastify will follow up with you directly on those questions. I'd like to thank our presenters today for a very informative presentation. And I'd like to thank all of the audience members here for joining us as well. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day. Sam, Jesse, Henry, thanks.